You to please take your seats. This will be starting our first session of the day. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub, I would like to extend my warm welcome to all of you today in our pavilion here at COP28. My name is Nitin Arora. I'm the project manager of UGIH. And today we'll start our session with exploring how we can address the issue of climate change and malnutrition together. So we have here Brent Locken from WWF. Maybe I can request Brent to introduce the session and proceed with the session. Brent, you have the floor.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. We're nearing the end of COP. Have you guys had a busy couple weeks? I think everybody, I've heard from some conversations that it's been a very busy last couple of weeks, and people are kind of nearing the end of this. But welcome, distinguished delegates, guests, ladies, and also gentlemen. A warm welcome to all at this event discussing the important connections between nutrition and also climate change, and celebrating ICAN, the Initiative on Climate Action and also Nutrition, which was launched last year at COP27. My name is Brent Locken, Global Food Lead Scientist at WWF, and I will be your moderator for this event. You might be asking why a WWF person is moderating an event on nutrition. It might seem like an odd person to have come in to moderate this. But I think that what that shows is just how far we've come in breaking silos over the past couple years and realizing that climate change, nutrition, and the environment are inextricably linked. Now, thinking back just a few short years ago, these were some conversations that were rarely held and we never heard talked about. And in a very short time, we have come a very long way. Now, this COP, more than ever, demonstrates how far up the agenda food has actually risen, and I think we can all see that. But we still have an extremely long way to go before food systems, nutrition, and nature are recognized more broadly, including in NDCs and official negotiations. But it's events like this and initiatives like ICAN that continue to set the agenda moving forward, and we should all increase our efforts on the road to COP30. Is this still working? Okay. We have a packed agenda today filled with many speakers, so let's jump right in. But before we do that, we have a short video to share you that will show you some of the intersections of nutrition and also climate and ICAN. If we could please roll the video. I think sometimes during the craziness of these events and all the discussions that we're having, we can forget that that's the type of world world that we are all working towards. We know that this conversation is more urgent. I think that is now clear. Climate change, malnutrition are two of the greatest challenges facing us today, and they are intertwined. What we're going to talk about today are some of the key innovations, policies, programs at all levels, globally, regionally, nationally, and also locally. And these are opportunities that we cannot afford to miss. To have this conversation further, we've got a fireside chat. Lawrence Haddad, the Executive Director for GAIN, Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, will be having a fireside chat with Honorable Jacqueline Amongan, Member of Parliament, Uganda, and His Excellency Renee Van Hel, Ambassador for Sustainable Development from the Netherlands. Lawrence, I would like to welcome you to the stage, and I would like to welcome the other speakers too.
Thank you, Brent. Would you like to join us? So, colleagues, what does nutrition? Why would a climate champion care about nutrition? It's a good question, isn't it? I like to think of food system as a kind of uncharted territory for the climate folks. It's uncharted territory filled with lots of opportunities to reduce emissions, filled with lots of opportunities to make adaptation to climate much more effective and successful. But it's uncharted, and I think nutrition can be a compass for climate champions in that food space, because it leads you to healthy diets. And healthy diets, certainly in the global north, is a way of reducing emissions. And healthy diets in the global south is going to probably increase animal source food consumption. But the challenge there is to make sure emissions do not increase dramatically as a result. So I think nutrition can be a really important compass. What we're going to talk about today is, hi Renee. Welcome, Renee. Good to please have a seat. We're going to talk about today is how we can effectively, if you think back to COP26 in Glasgow, what did we do in COP26? We identified the door that said food and agriculture. In COP27, we broke that door open. We pushed it open. It's ajar. And I think COP28 says, there's a big welcome sign above the door that says, come in. So now that the challenge for us is to come in a sensible way, to exploit the opportunities in the climate space and in the food space for mutual advance. That's what the ICANN initiative has been trying to do. We have gone through in this initiative with FAO, WHO, GAIN, and the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement. We have gone through all the NDCs, all the NAPs, the adaptation plans. We've gone through all the government food procurement policies. We've gone through all the food-based dietary guidelines. We've gone through all of the Green Climate Fund grants of the last 2 years. We've gone through all the climate finance, international climate finance. And we've looked in the climate space, how well represented is nutrition? It's hardly there at all. And we've looked in the nutrition space, how well represented is climate? Yep. It's hardly there at all. So the bad news is that these two worlds are pretty disconnected. They're ships that are passing in the night. The good news is the opportunities are limitless to engage and seek those synergies to make sure that climate and nutrition action is accelerated. Yeah. So I'm very happy to have our two excellencies here with me.
Sorry for being late.
Let me get my notes. I think Brent has introduced you both, but let me do a reintroduction as well. First, we have Honourable Jacqueline Amongan. Apologies if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, Jacqueline. Tell me how to...
It the right way.
Did I? Oh, good. That's good. That's probably the last thing I'll do right today. So thank you so much. And she's a member of Parliament at the Parliament of Uganda. Welcome. Thank you for joining us at pretty short notice. We really appreciate it. And His Excellency Renee Van Hal, About right?
Yeah, it's a strange name.
Okay. René is the ambassador for sustainable development in the Netherlands. And I think it's really nice that we have, we have sustainable development, we have nutrition, we have the legislature from Uganda. It shows you how interconnected these issues are. So Jacqueline, let me start with you. I've got a script, but let's try not to be too scripted, if we can. My question is, what do you think, when you think of the links between climate and nutrition, what do you think in the context of your work and your world?
Okay, so thank you so much. And like I'm already introduced, a member of parliament, but not only that, I also chair the Africa Parliamentarians Network on Climate Action, where we bring a nexus in different aspects, especially in regards to food, nutrition, and strengthening food systems. So when we're talking about nutrition and climate change, it definitely has a huge nexus. I want to give an example. For example, in Uganda, where I come from, almost 3 of every 10 children of under 5 years are facing under malnutrition. Yes. And this malnutrition is brought by different scenarios. Lack of food balance, and sometimes children go for maybe a cup of porridge a day. So, so this cannot be comparable with the rest of the population in the world. So therefore, in the COP28, when we are discussing about the thematic areas, loss and damage, and that's an area, the thematic area that I'm following keenly in this whole negotiation. You cannot leave the aspect of nutrition, because it's very key, and when there are floods and there are droughts, for example, in Africa, where I come from, definitely the food system is affected, and definitely that brings to lack of food, and therefore stuntation becomes even higher. And Africa accounts for 40% of the stuntation in the whole world. So I would think that there's a huge nexus between climate change and nutrition in the world.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And nexus is the key word, isn't it? And I don't expect you to respond to this, but when I think of loss and damage, when I think of kids' brains and nervous systems and immune systems being damaged by malnutrition, yes, I can't think of anything more profound than that being part of the loss and damage world. René, your team coordinates international climate, and welcome. Good to have you. Thank you for making time. Your team coordinates international climate and energy policy, and a portfolio related to water, energy, and of course, food. Yeah. And I know that you're interested in ICANN. What are your reflections and expectations, either on ICANN or more broadly in terms of connecting nutrition with climate?
Last year, when we launched this thing under Egyptian leadership, it was my minister, who, by the way, says hello to you. My minister is on maternity leave, so she cannot make it, unfortunately, to the COP. But she said, ICANN, we must. And indeed, just as the honorable member of the Ugandan parliament shared, there's this nexus within food, and also the nexus that we're trying to look at is the water, energy, and food. And then we're trying to focus on basic services to allow people to have some level of a decent existence, and that is, of course, also clean cooking, it's access to electricity, it's water and sanitation, and it's also food. And within food, we focus a lot on improving the productivity and sustainability of smallholder farmers, and sustainability is an important compact in that. But let's say the reality check is really diets, because what we see is that there are interlinkages between smallholder farmers and the way their markets operate, and what is actually at the end of the day ending up in households. That is a very critical one. So we are involved in 6 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, focusing on diets. And my total portfolio is about 800 million per year, and within that, 380 million is spent on food, and a third on diets, because diets is for us really the reality check. of all the things that we're doing, because at the end of the day, you alluded to that, and also the honorable member of parliament, that stunting, and it's about kids, it's about how kids grow up. It's so basic. And I also think that whoever ever thinks that the COP is about hoity-toity, difficult things, no, it's about ordinary people's improving ordinary people's life.
I often think malnutrition is a human face of unabated climate change, right? René, are there any particular innovations or partnerships that come to mind when we think about this?
Of course, if I think about that, we work a lot with care and gain, but we also, I mentioned already, we do smallholders, we do diets, but we also do a lot of knowledge. So increasingly, we're also challenging our friends from CGIAR, the beautiful international network on research related to ag and food, to really challenge and address these issues. So the care, the gain, of course, also the Sun movement. I think I speak among people who are also friends of the Sun movement. Those are the ones that we're focusing on. There was a Dutch lady leading the Sun movement for quite a while. We were at the beginning of it, and we're not going away because it is way too important.
That's really good to hear, because Sun is such an important umbrella for all of us to work in.
Yeah.
And you mentioned research, and researchers also have we're all about breaking silos here, right? And researchers are often very, very siloed as well, and it's challenging for them to break out of these silos. We've just done some research looking at, in a country context, how do you maximize the nutritional value of a food per unit of emissions that are generated. And you had these two separate groups, one group working on the nutritional value of food, another group working on the emissions of food, and they don't put their work together so that we can make informed decisions. And I very much hope the CGR and others will do that. Jacqueline, let me ask you a similar question. What innovative partnerships or innovations come to mind when you think of climate nutrition? Who are the leading lights? Who should we be looking to in Uganda or globally, in the part of the Africa network?
Okay, so I think that issues to deal with nutrition need involvement of all key stakeholders. Already from this COP, I have been following basically the food and nutrition aspects as well. And I'm very much energized when I get back to Uganda. First of all, there are gaps that need to be addressed, especially being a member of parliament. You also need enabling legislations. Enabling legislation so that nutrition is as a matter of not just a privilege, but a matter of urgency by governments to address. So revamping on the food and nutrition policies. Most countries, I would like to talk about Africa basically, because that's where I have more knowledge. Most countries do not even have food and nutrition policies in country as a legislation. So you find that access to food is like a matter of voluntarism. So that's why you see that some people go to sleep without food. And that's why you see that in this scenario where we are talking about climate emergency shocks. Right now I'm speaking here, but the region where I come from, including my own constituency, there are heavy floods that have smashed all people's farms and cropland. These people have sought refuge somewhere. So food is definitely a challenge to those people, despite having no shelter. It's even worse for children. And it was, me being a mother, it's worse for expectant mothers, where you expected to be eating almost after every four hours. So to me, it is something that is really disturbing. And I am going back to Uganda not only as a legislator, but revamping policies, but also setting up a food bank. That's what I've resolved, that next year I'll be coming here to celebrate that I've set up a food bank in Uganda so as to solve the challenges of malnutrition among especially the displaced because of climate shocks. Yeah. Hopefully I've answered. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, let me ask you a follow-up. I mean, most countries that have succeeded in reducing hunger quite significantly, and Uganda is one of those countries, the policymakers don't are not terribly receptive to the idea of, okay, you've dealt well with food quantity issues, but now you also need to deal with food quality issues, diet issues. How do you sell that in Parliament? How do you convince people in the legislature that it's not just about the volume of food, it's about the types of food?
So right now, as a country in Uganda, Uganda is setting up diet guidelines because in the previous, people have been eating the way they wish. There were totally no guidelines. But right now, working with Ministry of Health, they're putting up diet guidelines that can guide the community. No, it's not just a matter of having a quantity, but quality of the food. But while we are talking about quality, there are those who do not even have access to what they can do. While we are talking about quality, there are those who totally don't have access to food. I would give example in the northern parts of Uganda, Karamoja, totally dry lands.
Yes.
Children get on the streets, mothers. It's a situation which is not really good. So before we talk about quality, which is very important, we also have to talk about access.
Sure.
And access has been brought by the challenges, including, especially in the greater parts of Uganda, its challenges in regards to the droughts, prolonged droughts a whole year. And in Uganda, we still rely on voluntary rain. If it doesn't rain for a whole year, it means that community will never have food, because we have not yet adopted these other technologies which I've seen in the different parts of the world, whereby they can do, we could do probably irrigation so that during even the time of dry season, people can continue with cultivation. Yeah. So some parts of Uganda have not reached that level. So talking about diet, also we have to link dieting with access to actually having food so as to address malnutrition.
Yeah, the climate projections are scary when you look at what's going to happen in 2050 and 2020 and 2070, especially in that sort of crescent from the Sahel all the way through to Angola. It's kind of a reverse C. But I think a lot of people forget that what's happening now is desertification. Kids only having, as you said, one plate of porridge a day. So diet quality and diet quantity are massive problems. On the food-based dietary guidelines, I wonder if you're going to follow the example of one or two other African countries and build in sustainability issues as well as the nutrition quality issues. Can you get your Ministry of Environment involved as well as Ministry of Health?
This is the guidelines that they are setting now after we raised these issues in Parliament, and then Minister of Health took this up. But like you're saying, this is not an issue of just Minister of Health. It's a cross-cutting issue, and climate change has to be mainstreamed. So bring on board other players, including Minister of Water and Environment, because when we're talking about even nutrition, some areas have no access to water. And food is not just about eating, it's also about drinking. So all these aspects have to be taken into consideration, including the ministries of local government. So I agree with you. It's something that cuts across, and mainstreaming climate change in all these aspects is very critical.
It's music to
But also to let you know that we are trying to come up with a model law for Africa on food and nutrition, so that if these model laws are adopted by the different parliaments, then domestication of these model laws, not only necessarily only in Uganda, but also in other countries, so that together we move as a bloc.
So that's a way of scaling up as well, isn't it?
Yes.
So the developing the model laws and then legislation that enables them to scale up. And it's music to my ears to hear a senior parliamentarian who has a cross-African mandate as well, so knowledgeable about malnutrition. It's really music to my ears. Renee, we heard about the legislation and policies and laws as one enabler. What are some other enablers that we can help scale things up?
I think one of the enablers is if ministries of finance, planning, and economic affairs start thinking about water as they do about energy. Because water is a relatively scarce resource, but we should also start treating it, just as you said. The other enabler would be that we should, that indeed it's a whole of government approach. And so, for example, I'm from Foreign Affairs, but my colleagues from the Ministry of Health are also pushing me to tell you that the inclusion of ICANN in the zero draft of the World Health Assembly is important. I mean, it's important to set these stages. And I think it's really important to link the basic services that we're trying to provide to our citizens, that they are aligned. So that it's wash, that it's foods, that it's clean cooking, because they're interlinked. It would be very odd to have clean cooking without wash. So that is an enabler. And from a donor perspective, and by the way, we're very proud that we have already been engaged with Uganda for many, many years, and we're going to stay because we know that you need it, and we also know that you do good things. But from a donor perspective, it's also very important to think through all those silos, to get rid of all those silos, and to also challenge the MDBs, the UN organizations to much better work together. One of the things that we're doing with UNICEF is trying to reach 60 million young women who are on an age that they can also become pregnant, to have decent diets. Because during their pregnancy and right after, this is so pivotal, this is so important to start avoiding stunting. It's also very important that UNICEF WASH and UNICEF diets, that they break up those stovepipes. I mean, we need more money, and there will be some more money, but it will never, never, never be enough. So we also have to think about impact. And one of the other enablers, what we also increasingly are good at, for example, also in a country like Uganda, is involving the private sector. And think of platforms in which we can cooperate together, and not having all kinds of rules and regulations on our sides or in the country itself that do not enable us to work with them and make them these multipliers.
Yeah, so enablers, policy, legislation, private sector,
Yep.
markets, and then partners. Partners
Yep.
who can, if they're working with you or adjacent to you, they can unlock greater potential. Yep. And it strikes me that this is Food, Agriculture, and Water Day, and food and water, nutrition and water, somehow are still far too separate. It seems to me. In your portfolio, René, you mentioned it was about 800 million.
Yeah.
How do you try to break down those barriers within your portfolio?
Well, as I said, one of the things that we did was co-hosting with Tajikistan the UN Water Conference, just to bring across this idea that water is actually a relatively scarce resource and that we help our citizens by treating it that way. Another one is to have very, how do you say that, poignant conversations with the World Bank. What does it mean if they have a global challenge program for water? Has it any linkages with the global challenge program for agriculture? Yes, it does, but how does it work out? What does it mean that we have all these funds, the GEF, the GCF, the LDCF, the CIFs, and how do they cooperate with the World Bank? And the World Bank always has wonderful ideas about how you should change a country, but they only bring this much of the pie, because there's only a couple of bankable products. So how do they think about the financial architecture to bring that all on board? And we're also challenging our own university, Wageningen, which is part of CGR, to be active and have this whole of approach. Because we all know that on the one hand we need science and we need knowledge, but on the other hand, whenever you talk to a scientist, he or she oftentimes has a tendency to scope very much, which is probably very good for the advancement of knowledge. But if you want to make policy, then you have and you want to valorize, give value to your knowledge, you need to also have this broad look. So we don't want CGR being up in an ivory tower, but they need to be on the ground as well, applying their stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talk about food systems and water systems and land systems. Systems are beautiful things in the sense that they create the permission, the links, the opportunities, but we have to seize them. We can't just say we like food systems and then keep doing the same thing we were doing before we liked food systems. No. That's the challenge, it seems to me. Let me ask you, panelists, one final question for a very brief reflection. What does success look like in a year's time in this space? What would you like to see in this space, in the Nexus space? What does success look like? Give me one example.
Okay. To me, I think we need to upscale nutrition. Um, in our modus operandi, it should be treated like any other factor when we are talking about climate change because it has a nexus. And then this has to be informed by policies in countries. And to me, that's what I think needs to be changed. And also, I'm looking at financing, like Ambassador, His Excellency mentioned here. The financing should not be restricted. These financing arrangements that we come up with at the COPs, to the GCF, the GEF, the Global Environment Facility. Now we have Loss and Damage Fund, yes, the Adaptation Fund. They shouldn't be limited to only special aspects, but the focus should also be to improving on nutrition in countries, and especially in this time when countries are facing climate shocks. So that's what I would say.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Renee.
This is a bit of a trick, but now I can say, you take the words out of my mouth, so that allows me to say something else. And what I also like to say is that we are super concerned about the El Nino effect in Somalia, what's going on in your country, but also, for example, what's going on in Somalia. 7 to 10 million people not at home, not having time to start, how do you say it? Start agricultural production. So there's there is this threat of and the need for emergency response. And what I very much hope is that we're much more intelligent in linking emergency response with forward-looking, more structural solutions. And we can do that on many, many ways. But if the World Food Programme and organizations like IFAD also increasingly think about emergency responses and how they can play into that and structurally change things in order to avoid loss and damage, human disasters, I think that would also, if we make a step there, that would also be super valuable.
Thank you. And I think linking nutrition and climate is one way of perhaps breaking another barrier between sort of relief response and making systems more resilient in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Colleagues, I'd like to thank both of our speakers. Before I hand it back to Brent, and Brent is a great example of someone who breaks down barriers, and we have a lovely partnership between GAIN and WWF because of that. But before I do, I would implore you all to think and act not unilaterally, but laterally.
Yeah.
Be intellectually curious, work outside of your space, get out of your comfort zone, and leave your egos and logos at the door, because that is a barrier to breaking down silos. Yeah. So, colleagues, thank you so much, Excellencies, for being here, and back to you.
Thank you. Sorry for being late, but it was fun.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, it's very fun.
Thank you so much. Yes.
That was great, madam.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Oh, you are taking the mic with you. I was warned if you use that, you're going to be stuck up here, so. Thank you very much, speakers. You know, it was fantastic to hear the speakers talk about their commitment to health, nutrition. Like I started with, this is something that we weren't talking about just a few years ago. But we cannot rest on where we are today. We have to, like we said at the very end, what does success look like over the next couple of years? We still have a lot of work left to do. Interesting about water. On the way here, I saw our water lead. And even within WWF, we have a tough time integrating food and water, and we have a long way to go on that. But to talk some more about the innovations in terms of how we can achieve this and what we have to do moving forward, we've got 3 fantastic speakers I would like to welcome to the stage. Professor Simone Pettigrew, and I'm going to have you come up here to the stage and introduce yourself too, because I might not be saying the names correctly. Ms. Mutanga Kampangeli Mapani and Mr. Barbaros Korgoglu. I'm going to have you reintroduce yourself, okay? These 3 speakers will talk a little bit about some of the work that they're doing and some of the innovations, and Simone, I'd like to start with you. I think you've got a short presentation, and if you could just tell a little bit about what you do, where you're from, and what you're going to be talking about. So,
thank you so much, Brent. And I'm just going to flick through some slides, so please excuse me for coming off to the side here. My name is Simone Pettigrew. I'm from the George Institute for Global Health. We have representatives across various countries. I'm based in Australia in the Sydney office. I'm going to be talking to you about our Healthy People, Healthy Food, Healthy Planet Centre of Research Excellence, which is really around blending that nexus of nutrition and sustainability, helping people choose food products that meet both sets of requirements. Just looking for that. Thank you very much. Okay, and our centre at the moment, it comprises more than 30 researchers and students across 4 countries, Australia, New Zealand, the UK and the USA, but we're really interested in collaborating with a really broad range of representatives from other countries, particularly those that are at the earliest stages of the nutrition transition to packaged food products. The focus of our centre is really looking at how do we bridge that nexus between the foods that are nutritious and the foods that are sustainable. Good evidence to show that there's quite a strong correlation, not always. So for instance, meat products can be nutritionally sound but not so sustainable. Now, if you're a consumer and you're going to try and make these kinds of food choices, it's actually really quite complicated. We've got some advances like nutrition front of pack labeling that's helping people to identify nutritionally superior options, but how do they identify sustainable options? So we've got, for instance, the planetary health plate. So we kind of generally know at an aggregate level what foods are more sustainable than others, but most of us consume most of our foods in packaged food format, which makes it much harder to figure out what's sustainable and what's not. And we have this proliferation of different kinds of market signaling, trying to get consumers to buy their products, but what do those actually mean? Most people don't know, and most of those haven't actually got good, credible systems underlying them anyway. So at the George Institute for a decade now, we've had a tool called Food Switch, and consumers can use to swipe a barcode and they'll obtain all kinds of nutrition information about a product that may or may not already exist on pack. And by generating the database behind Food Switch, we can tell the Australian government how much saturated fat is in the food supply, how much salt is in the food supply. So although it's a consumer-facing tool, it's really helpful for policymakers. It's also really useful for motivating businesses because once consumers have better information and can make better choices, they improve the formulation of their food products. Now, of particular interest probably to this audience is that we have just very recently also launched an EcoSwitch app. So again, you scan the barcode of packaged food products and it lets consumers know the sustainability of that particular product. So to do this, we draw down all the data from food products that exist on the labels, and then the red ones here are the ones that give us insights into the sustainability of the food. We have then done a huge program of work looking at the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the 1,000 most prevalent food ingredients across the packaged food supply. Don't try and read all of this, but it's basically saying we take an individual product, we look at the ingredients list, we use machine learning to generate how much weight each ingredient allocates to the product. We then apply our greenhouse gas emission calculations and we add adjustments for the level of processing of the food and whether it's imported or not. And then based upon all that, we generate down to this little reading here that allocates a sustainability score for consumers. So interestingly, chocolate's really bad for the environment. So if you scan this particular chocolate product, it tells you that it only gets 1 star rating for its sustainability, but it importantly offers you alternatives within a similar product category for more sustainable product options that you as a consumer can make. So we then have the choices that can actually assist consumers rather than them making do the legwork. And you can then slide through to see the other information relevant to that particular product. So you can see here that not only is this not getting a very good planetary health rating, it's also not getting a very good nutritional rating either. So adding impetus and also then providing the nutrition information panel data. Our next aim is to take that same type of algorithm and apply it to food packaging. So shortly we'll be coming up with a food packaging sustainability score. And these scores at the moment are based on greenhouse gas emissions. And that's a really important starting point for climate change. But we are already a long way down the track of adding all other kinds of environmental indicators to the base algorithms to make these indicators more comprehensive over time. It's really important for us that these kinds of innovations have both upstream and downstream potential. So they're definitely designed around helping consumers make more nutritional and sustainable choices, but really importantly, they're also around providing governments with the data they need to make better policy and for motivating businesses to reformulate, reprocess their products to make them more nutritious and more sustainable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. I've got a couple follow-up questions, which that tool looks quite fascinating, and you know, you've focused more on the role of like the consumer in terms of being able to make those choices. But there's a tension also between putting too much onus on the consumer versus the government creating the enabling conditions that allows the consumer to be able to make those choices, especially if food is not affordable. So if you could just briefly touch on that tension in terms of how you're dealing with that.
That's a really good question. And this is a consumer-facing app, but really, really importantly, particularly for sustainability, is that we need to interact with governments and we need to interact with the food industry and particularly the retailers. So we're already having a lot of interaction with retailers in particular over this tool because they find it very useful. Manufacturers of food products have a recipe. They know what nutrients go into the food, so they know how nutritionally healthy it is. Many manufacturers have no idea about the sustainability of their food products. This app is going to be really helpful for the producers of the food products as well as the consumers.
We found also in Scandinavia that coffee and chocolate had huge impacts. And we tend to focus a lot on meat as being the bad person. And when we started to reduce our overall consumption, we found that we could not get it below planetary boundaries until we actually addressed coffee and chocolate consumption, which is something that Scandinavians do not want to talk about. Well, I think many people do. Ms. Mapani, yeah? I'm going to have you re-say your name because I'm really sorry. You're Director of National Food and Nutrition Commission of Zambia, and you advise the government in all matters relating to food and nutrition, right? Based on your context, what innovations can you share that can really help to scale this nexus of climate change and also nutrition?
Thank you very much. I think it has been said over and over again that a climate crisis is a food and nutrition crisis. So we can't run away from coming up with innovations that will address the climate as we look at food and nutrition. So one of the major issues affecting sub-Saharan Africa, where I come from Zambia, is the post-harvest loss. It is estimated by FAO that approximately 37% of the food that is produced in sub-Saharan Africa and in Africa as a whole is wasted. And this wasting is at various stages ranging from production, harvesting, storage, transportation, marketing, and even at the point of consumption. And unfortunately, this is a bad paradox because sub-Saharan Africa has one of the highest levels of malnutrition. In my own country, Zambia, stunting levels are about 35%. So we wish we could consume all the food that we produce, but unfortunately, it's not like that. So our innovation is to address this post-harvest loss at the markets in Zambia, as we shall endeavor to address the climate change issue. At the Zambian markets, particularly at this one big market in Zambia, in the city, Lusaka, where I come from, there's a lot of waste of fruits, vegetables, and other farm produce that simply goes to waste and it's taken to the dump waste. So our plan is to go and collect all these fruits and vegetables from this large market and turn it into organic compost. And this, we hope, will be used by the small-scale farmers. We intend to make it 100% plant-based organic compost. This, we envision, has the potential to improve the antibacterial control in the soil as well as the air. And it's also odorless when you compare with the other organic compost. And it also has the potential to save water utility by about 70% because of its high moisture holding capacity and permeability, and also increased organic content of the soil. Our country, Zambia, has not been exempt from the effects of climate change, which include drought and flooding. And this has the potential to degrade the soils, and therefore the plants that are grown there will not be of high nutritional value. So we therefore hope that this innovation will reduce post-harvest waste by plowing back some of this food into the soil and mitigate the effects, the negative effects of climate change. Thank you.
I mean, that's such a fantastic example of an innovation, and we've been doing some work at WWF in terms of also broadening our thinking of innovations to also thinking about social innovations and political innovations and not just tech innovations, right? Are there any like social or political innovations that would help to scale this food loss and waste innovation that you just talked about, to take it from something small to something bigger?
Yes, absolutely. So there is already some things which are happening, but at a very small scale in the backyard of people's homes. So we intend to make this big because there are some small-scale farmers who have no access to this food which is going to waste. And my organization is that organization that coordinates different arms of government as well as partners to bring together this kind of innovation. So we hope to take it from the small scale where it is to bring it to scale.
And is this an example of an innovation that can be, what other countries could this innovation work in that are also suffering from the same issue?
Done?
What other countries could this work in, where whether it's sub-Saharan Africa or whether it's other parts of the world?
In the country, I would say that most of this has been restricted to the rural areas, and as I said, in the backyards. But if we can bring it to the city so that this organic compost can actually be sold in places where people can easily access it. Yeah.
Thank you. Fantastic example of an innovation, and we just need more examples like this. So thank you for your work. Mr. Barbaros
Barbaros will be fine.
Thank
Yeah.
you, thank you. You're from Rabobank, yeah?
Correct.
And what's your observation of the nutrition agenda at COP so far? I'm very, very curious. I mean, and I think there's two different streams. There's the discussions within civil society and the more action-oriented discussions we're having here. And then there's the other side, the official, what's happening within the formal negotiations. Would like to, hear your thoughts on that.
No, thank you, Brent. I think Lawrence mentioned in the beginning, right? I think this is a massive COP. As of this morning, 150 countries have signed up to the Declaration on Food Agriculture. That's a massive development. That will, I think, propel how we narrate food, how we narrate soils, how we narrate agriculture in the years to come. So we are very positive about that. And I'm very happy because being here is a bit of a homecoming for me, because at COP26 I hosted the Nutrition Day of the UNFCCC Innovation Hub. And at that time our narrative was, and Greta Thunberg at the time said, our house is on fire. And at that time, our narrative for this hub was, yes, our house is on fire, but we're either too sick or too fat to go out to save ourselves, let alone put the fire out. And as we stand today, the situation got even worse, right? Malnutrition is on the rise, and our time is getting shorter and shorter. Climate change, of course, has a compounding effect on how we create nutrition. And climate change means diverse soil. So Rabobank is a transition bank, so we are a bank of transition for food systems, transition for energy, and transition for social transitions. And coming to this COP, we have been advocating for 3 different types of innovations. So on the financial innovation side, we have been advocating that, when we talk about food systems, it's responsible for 30% of the emissions and 70% of freshwater withdrawals. But when you look at it, only less than 4% of global climate finance goes into food systems. And at many times, there are many commitments about millions and billions, but this will not change the game. This will not move the needle. So we have been advocating to leverage the trillions that are needed to food systems. We have to convert water, biodiversity, carbon, and social dimensions into asset classes. So we put a value against that. And if we can do that, as a private bank, but also MDBs, could indeed leverage the trillions that need to go urgently into the food systems. The second innovation that we have been advocating here is on the policy side, so it's policy innovation. Next year, companies will need to disclose their ESG reporting. This reporting will go quite far, at least in Europe, but I think Europe will indeed set the pace, as we have seen in the GDPR regulation. We have been advocating that, yes, that reporting is good. Indeed, it needs more standardization, more common languages, but it falls short when it comes to food systems. We need to have nutrition KPIs, part of the ESG reporting. That will be essential. And the third innovation that we have been advocating, actually that is since the UN Food Systems Summit back in 2021, is the True Value of Food initiative. We don't value the food that we have or we eat, and we need to internalize the externalities. These could be negative externalities, again, on the land, on the soil, and water, but it could be positive externalities as well, so that we reward the farmers, the first movers, to produce more healthy food, more quality food, nutrient-dense food. What we see, sadly, is across the world, much of the land is depleted, or as we say it, land mining is done to produce empty calories, and we have to stop that. And as a transition bank, we are happy to play our part in that. Yeah.
That's fascinating idea about integrating food systems into ESG scores, and I haven't thought about that yet. Is that something that you envision? How actively is it being talked about, and how far away would you say this is from actually happening?
It's not talked about at all. I think it's only Rabobank that talks about this. And the reason is the following. The EU taxonomy, which determines what is a sustainable activity and what is not a sustainable activity, unfortunately classifies farming sector, agriculture, as a not sustainable area. So if you invest in agriculture, if you invest in land, it actually is a negative score on your performance. So we have to change that. We have to change the narrative. Yeah.
Interesting. So we've just got maybe 1 or 2 more minutes. So in 30 seconds, I would like to put you all on the spot. And I'll start with you, Barbaros, to tell us, what does success look like at COP this year to you?
I think we are still quite far out. But the good thing is, the great success is, and it started back again in the UN Food Systems Summit. We were variously different organizations, NGOs, private sector, public sector. We were in different silos. This year, we are a community of about 1,000 people from different areas, and we collaborate together to push the food systems agenda, to health agenda, the nutrition agenda. And we have got no divisions between ourselves. And that's very powerful, I think, going forward.
Great. Ms. Mapani, what does success look like to you at this COP?
Thank you. For me, looking at the topics that are being discussed on nutrition at this year's COP, going forward, I would think that we need to take the next steps. We need to go back home, put into place the innovations, and come back and report. That will be success.
And lastly, Simone.
That's a tricky one, isn't it? I think there's a lot of talk going on, and I think we're making progress in terms of bringing things to conversation. I think making the commitments and keeping them are probably still much further down the track, but important objectives.
So thank you to all our speakers. I think that we have made tremendous progress over the last couple of years on these topics, and we need to celebrate that progress. I mean, yes, we probably won't get all the wins that we want, but that is part of the process, right? And, now it's time we need to go back home, hop on those planes, go back home, maybe rest a couple days, not too long, but then there's a lot of work that we have to do. So thank you very much for your efforts. Thank you. Okay, to close this session, we often say that the youth are the future leaders, but I would like to say the youth are actually like the leaders of today. And to close out this session, this wonderful session, I would like to welcome to the stage Ms. Audrey Wong to give some concluding remarks from the youth perspective. Thank you.
Well, it is definitely very exciting to hear all the innovations that you guys mentioned. I think that we all see that there's an urgency to address this interconnection between climate change and food system. I think that we all agree that food is more than just what we eat, but it actually links to so many more of the SDGs that we keep talking about, that of the goals. I'm very happy to hear a lot about how we need to work together and then to continue to prepare ourselves with the knowledge and then the goals. And of course, I'm excited to hear about like the app. I see that the young people nowadays, that we are being more and more creative, and then we continue to use different apps and then use machine learning. So one of the things that we also work on, since I'm with the Youth Policy of the World Food Forum, is that we work on the free rice challenges to share a lot more about food waste, so more people would learn about it. But I really want to challenge everyone to think that when we work with this food issue, it's not just raising awareness, is more about the sustainable change that we will bring to our community. There are so many more young people who might be facing malnutrition today, and we need to work together to make sure that they also have the right to have the food, and then also with like clean water, and then we can continue to build this community and to secure this earth that we all want. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'm excited to connect with everyone.
Thank you so much. And with that, I'm always humbled at these sessions in terms of what's happening, and that's the great thing about this. And thank you, everybody. Keep up the good fight. There's a lot more to do, and we look forward to being in touch. Thank you.